The laughter came first, sharp and careless, bouncing off the narrow walls of the aircraft cabin as the man with the stained hands shuffled down the aisle. Grease darkened the creases of his fingers, oil smudged his sleeves, and exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. He held a small backpack close to his chest, the kind meant for a child, not a grown man, and his eyes stayed lowered as if he already knew what everyone was thinking. On a plane full of crisp uniforms, polished shoes, and confident smiles, the dirty-handed single dad looked painfully out of place. What no one knew, what no one even bothered to imagine, was that before this flight landed, the same people laughing would be holding their breath, watching in silence as respect found him at 30,000 feet. Before the story pulls you deeper, take a moment. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in judging people by their hearts instead of their appearance, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach the people who need them most. His name was Aaron Cole, and life had carved its lessons into him with rough hands. Once, years ago, he had worn a uniform too, one that fit sharply across his shoulders and carried responsibility heavier than rank. But life rarely moves in straight lines. After the sudden loss of his wife, after the long nights rocking a crying baby with no one to trade shifts with, Aaron had stepped away from everything he once was to become what his daughter needed. He became both mother and father, nurse and teacher, provider and comfort. When the money ran thin and the bills grew teeth, he took the only work he could find near home, fixing engines in a small hangar that smelled of fuel and sweat. The job paid just enough to keep the lights on, and it left his hands permanently marked, as if proof of the sacrifices he made every day. This flight wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity. His daughter Lily was finally getting a surgery that doctors said could change her life, and the appointment was hundreds of miles away. Aaron had worked double shifts, sold old keepsakes, and swallowed his pride more times than he could count just to afford the ticket. He hadn't had time to scrub the oil from under his nails before rushing from the hangar to the airport. He told himself it didn't matter. What mattered was Lily. What mattered was making it there on time. But cabins have mirrors in the form of strangers, and every glance reminded him of what he looked like to them. Business travelers wrinkled their noses. A group of young men whispered and laughed, nudging each other as Aaron passed. Someone took a photo, quick and cruel, as if his presence was entertainment. Aaron kept moving. He always did. Pride had become a luxury he couldn't afford. He found his seat near the back, placing the small backpack under it with careful hands. Inside were Lily's things, a stuffed rabbit missing one ear, a children's book worn thin from rereading, and a folded drawing she had slipped inside that morning. A stick figure dad holding hands with a smaller stick figure girl, both smiling under a crooked sun. That drawing had kept him upright more times than he could count. As the plane filled, a different kind of presence settled in. Several men boarded quietly, their posture unmistakable even in casual clothes. They moved with calm confidence, eyes alert, bodies disciplined. F-22 pilots, returning from a joint training exercise, though no one announced it. Those who recognized them did so instinctively, straightening in their seats, admiration flickering across their faces. These were people the world celebrated. Heroes in the sky, precision made, human. The contrast between them and Aaron felt cruelly obvious. Clean versus dirty. Admired versus ignored. Accomplished versus assumed worthless. As the plane taxied, Aaron closed his eyes and breathed slowly. He had learned to tune out noise, to shrink his world down to what he could control. He thought about Lily waiting with her grandmother, about the promise he'd made to bring her back something special, about the hope he carried like a fragile glass thing inside his chest. He did not notice the pilot's glances at his hands, not the way their attention lingered with something other than judgment. Turbulence came suddenly, shaking the cabin with a violence that drew gasps and nervous laughter. Overhead bins rattled. The plane dipped, then steadied, then dipped again. Fear rippled through the passengers like a living thing. Aaron opened his eyes, instinct rising before thought. Years of muscle memory hummed under his skin. He scanned the cabin, the ceiling, the subtle sounds beneath the chaos. His jaw tightened. This wasn't ordinary turbulence. Something was wrong. A flight attendant hurried past, face pale, gripping the seats for balance. The laughter from earlier died away, replaced by tense silence. Aaron felt the old weight settle on his shoulders, a familiar responsibility he had once carried without question. He pressed his palms against his knees, grounding himself, forcing himself to stay calm. Panic never saved anyone. Minutes stretched. The captain's voice came through, steady but strained, explaining a systems issue and asking everyone to remain seated. Fear sharpened, and somewhere a child began to cry. Aaron's thoughts went to Lily, to the fragile line between before and after, to how quickly everything could change. That was when one of the pilots stood. He moved down the aisle with purpose, speaking quietly to the crew, offering help. Another followed, then another. They were assessing, calculating, doing what they were trained to do. One of them stopped near Aaron's row, eyes narrowing slightly as he took in the man's posture, the way he watched the plane instead of the people, the calm coiled beneath exhaustion. Their eyes met. In that brief moment, something passed between them that words weren't needed for. Recognition. Not of status, but of experience. The pilot nodded once, subtle and respectful, then moved on. Aaron exhaled slowly. The plane shuddered again, then leveled out. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, the tension eased. Applause broke out, nervous and grateful, as the captain announced they were diverting safely to a nearby base. When the wheels finally touched the runway, relief flooded the cabin. People laughed shakily, hugged strangers, wiped tears they hadn't realized were falling. In the chaos, something unexpected happened. The pilots gathered near the front, speaking briefly among themselves, then one turned and walked back down the aisle. He stopped in front of Aaron. The cabin quieted, curiosity prickling the air. Phones came up again, but this time with a different energy. The pilot straightened, placed his hand over his heart, and inclined his head deeply toward the dirty-handed single dad. One by one, the others followed, standing at attention in the narrow aisle, offering him the same unmistakable gesture of respect. No words were spoken, but none were needed. The message was clear. They saw him. They knew. The laughter from earlier felt like a distant echo, something small and shameful. People stared, confused, then thoughtful, then moved. Some lowered their phones. Some lowered their eyes. Aaron sat frozen, heat rushing to his face. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't wanted attention. He had only done what he always did, stayed ready, stayed steady, carried what needed. Carrying. Slowly, he stood, awkward and unsure, and returned the gesture as best he could, his oil-stained hands trembling slightly. In that moment, the cabin held its breath. Afterward, as passengers disembarked onto the base, the mood was different. Strangers met Aaron's eyes and smiled. Someone pressed a bottled water into his hand. Another clapped him gently on the shoulder. The young men who had laughed earlier avoided his gaze, their faces flushed with something like regret. Aaron stepped onto solid ground, the sky white above him, and felt something loosen inside his chest. Not pride, exactly. Something quieter. Validation, perhaps. Or the simple relief of being seen for who he was, not how he looked. Later, as arrangements were made and passengers redirected, one of the pilots approached him again, offering help with connections, with transportation, with anything he needed. Aaron accepted with a nod, gratitude thick in his throat. He thought about Lily's drawing, about the crooked sun and the smiling figures. He thought about how he would tell her this story someday, not as a tale of danger, but as a lesson about dignity. Before we reach the end, take a moment and leave a comment sharing what this story made you feel. One word is enough. Your voice matters here. Aaron eventually made it to his destination. Lily's surgery went well. When she woke up, groggy but smiling, he was there, holding her hand with those same stained fingers. She squeezed them without hesitation, without judgment, because to her, they were the hands that built her world. Weeks later, back at the hangar, Aaron returned to his routine. Engines still needed fixing. Bills still needed paying. Life didn't transform overnight, but something inside him had changed. He stood a little straighter. He met people's eyes more often. He remembered that respect isn't something you wear, it's something you earn, often in silence. And somewhere, high above, F-22s cut through the sky, sleek and powerful, piloted by men who understood that heroism doesn't always look polished. Sometimes it looks like a single dad with dirty hands, carrying hope in a child's backpack, refusing to give up. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you to look twice at the people around you and led with compassion, Please like this video, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps keep stories like this alive, and reminds the world that respect, once given, can change everything.